Okay.
I read more webtoons online.
Okay, so name a couple of them. I'm following 37. There's a possibility I'd follow one of them.
Let's see. Refund High School. I Love You. God, I follow Sub-Zero. I follow like 10,000 of them.
Okay.
I just wrapped up my head.
Right. Sir?
My last comic book binge was there's a Wonderland series that was pretty cool. I read a lot of DC comic books, but that wasn't part of my last binge.
Got it. And you, sir?
There's an online comic called Cassiopeia Quinn.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh yes.
Yeah, that's a fun one.
That's one of my Monday reads. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, I have my web comics broken down into the dailies. I mean, the 7 day a week, and then the Monday through Friday, and then the Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, and the Thursday. Yeah, it's just easier to file on that way. Because I'm going to have to make up for a whole bunch that since I'm here at Archon, I've been on the road since Thursday, so I'm way behind on, especially Kevin and Kel. And if you haven't followed Kevin and Kel, I will highly recommend it. It was the first webcomic published in 1994 on CompuServe.
Oh wow!
The guy is still doing Kevin and Kel. He has never missed a day. He does three comics that are either online or published in the newspaper a week. 7 days a week. On Monday he draws one, inks the other, writes the third. On Tuesday he draws the second, or inks the second, writes the third. You know, and basically he's like a machine, and he's just turning out 3 comics a day. And for 25 years, 94 to now, 25 years, and has never missed a day. That is incredible dedication. The man is a machine. But so, why don't you introduce yourself?
Let's do that. My name's RJ Carter. I'm the publisher at criticalblast.com, where pop culture gets blasted. Published author.
But since you're a publisher, don't you?
I'm also the author of, currently the author on Warren Murphy's The Destroyer series with Remo Williams, the master assassin of Sinanju. Monumental Terror just rolled off the presses last Saturday, so it's still a little warm. And here at Archon with the rest of you guys, now talking about comic books.
My name is Richard White. I am a science fiction, fantasy, nonfiction, fantasy noir, action adventure. Basically, if you'll cut me a check, I will write it. But I got started in writing comic books back in the 90s during the small press explosion. Unfortunately, I also got caught in the small press implosion when the distributor wars happened, and Diamond basically ate all of the rest of the distributors and immediately cut all the small press that they could out. So I have written a few more comics that I have put out there. Of course, something about artists like getting paid is kind of can be problematic.
Not anymore, though.
Oh no! I pay my. I don't do co-royalties. I pay my artists because there may never be any royalties, and they deserve something. Maybe not much, but I mean, I ain't got much, but I can at least pay them something. But I've been trying to get back into doing comics, and I actually wind up doing more writing short stories about comics these days than I do actual writing scripts. But I understand how to write scripts, and I don't know where the rest of our panel is. So we're going to go with our experience and try to help you guys out.
So who has got a script in progress that they're working on? Good. What's holding you up?
My computer ate it.
Ooh!
And I had to rewrite it from memory, and here we are.
Yep, been there, done that. Turned in 6 issues of a script to a guy who was going to publish. He was going to be a publisher. Had a great artist who had actually done some Spider-Man stuff, Rajiv Golay. Decided not to pay the artist decided not to work, and I didn't get the scripts back. Now the man's dead. And my brain says, when I sit down to write, it's like, we already know this story. Why are we wasting time on it? I'm like, because I don't have it anymore. Screw it. So you never get to read Hero Club.
Would you care to introduce yourself, sir?
Hi, my name's Brock Hankey. This is about writing for comic books. I have
Are you our moderator?
I have written and sold a very small number of comics, but I have also sold every submission I ever sent in.
Ooh, ah.
Other than that,
Batting
I've
thousand.
spent my life writing computer manuals and baseball analysis books. That's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to write comic books, but they will just throw money at you if you're good at computers, and I turn out to be really good at computers. So my entire comic book career just sort of waited as they kept throwing money at me.
Hey,
That doesn't mean I don't have a collection of comics going back to 1956 Showcase 4, because I do.
But yeah, you're in the middle of.
I even had pages ready to go to eat those too. But I found them, I sent them to a friend on Facebook. It's just a JPEG, but it's something.
Well, at least then now you can recover theoretically.
Yes, you can retype it, or if you've got some really good OCR software.
Yeah.
you can
Wait, what
type it
happened
with
here?
it.
I wrote a script, my computer crashed, took everything with it.
Hey, the computer guy just got here.
You were writing
Okay,
a
well,
script
let me
and you
rephrase that.
didn't
It
back it up
refuses-
every day?
It refuses to boot up.
Right.
That's a fixable problem. But-
Yeah, that's a problem. But, you know, that's what jump drives are for.
Yeah. I have
Just
the
stick it in
animation
at the
for
end of the
comic
day,
on the
move it
jump
over
drive.
there, and there it is on that jump drive.
Yeah.
You can get a terabyte jump drive now for not that much.
Yes.
It's just,
Yeah.
you keep.
I having had my cat walk across and managing to somehow hit the Control Alt erase everything.
Oh,
I hate that combination of keys.
Yeah, why they have it on there, I don't know yet. So now, yes, I have the thumb drive and the portable hard drive. I don't go to Google Docs because I don't trust Google any farther than I can throw this building. But basically, yeah, and when I actually go to do my first edits, I actually print off a hard copy just in case. But I tend to be actually after you lose basically 60,000 words out of a 100,000 word novel,
oh, man.
you
didn't have any
you
backup?
I thought I had it backed up,
Oh.
but I only had the first 20,000 words backed up.
I had Hero
So
Club back.
sorry.
Yeah, so am I.
That's a huge number of words to lose.
Yes, it was. It was many because considering I type 50 words a minute.
Oh.
Yes, it was a lot. That was a lot of man hours and nothing else that I just lost.
I lost a script that I had backed up because, well, the backup was the original on a 5 1/4
Woohoo!
floppy.
A really, honest to God, floppy drive that will bend.
It was floppy, and I eliminated it. By which I mean I had it on a counter and I spilled lemonade.
Trust me, if there is a way to lose something, a writer will find the way to lose it. So how about you? You're in the process of writing one?
Yes, I have written it, and the artist, who's a good friend of mine, has gone through a couple family tragedies that have just pretty much stopped the process dead. So, and we talked, and he'd rather just now work on the project so we can filter. So I'm taking the opportunity to do some revisions before looking for a new artist.
Okay. And
That might-
life happens. There's no way around that.
It might be a better idea if you could find one fast, find the artist first and collaborate on the revisions. Bring a fresh viewpoint, but I have no idea how fast you're gonna find an artist you want.
Right.
Let's see, somebody else, I think over here, you were working on one?
Mainly I just came for tips and tricks.
Okay.
And smoothing them because I've, unlike you, I have it on Google Docs because the guy who is making me write it is somewhere else.
Ah,
For collaboration purposes.
Yeah, and it's easier to share, like
Oh, sure.
the artist who's
sure.
like,
I
what's
understand
the
that.
next page? And I'm like, oh yeah, here.
I wrote something short that was gonna be just this little short thing, and I illustrated it, and I really liked it. So now I'm trying to go back and figure out, okay, how does this fit into something bigger?
Yeah. Now, how many people here in the audience have ever heard of something called the Marvel style? for
Yeah,
scripting,
yeah.
and the Dark Horse
Oh.
style for
No, I
scripting.
haven't heard that.
No,
No,
the Dark
for the Marvel and DC, I've never heard the Dark Horse.
Okay, because well,
I know
it got labeled the Dark Horse because they actually posted, here's how we, if you're gonna submit something to us, here's how we wanna see it laid out.
Oh,
But that was back in the early days of the internet, and then they immediately realized this was really stupid because they got flooded with a whole bunch of stuff, and they said, a Marvel, and maybe DC too, but the Marvel is basically, you write like a paragraph and say, this is what happens on page 1, and this is what happens on page 2, and so on. And then the artist draws it, and then you come back behind the artist and actually add in the words. So it's a two-step process.
and you're actually overestimating step one. They'll give you a paragraph this size and say, turn it into a 20-page story.
Yep.
And hand it to the penciler. Ramona Fraden just put out a comment about that I read. She'd been working on DC where she did Aquaman and Metamorpho for years. And she went over to Marvel and she said, they handed me this paragraph and told me to write a 17-page story. I didn't know what to do. I never had to do this before. How do I take this paragraph and figure out how to pace it? And there were artists who couldn't work the Marvel method because they couldn't make a story out of a premise. They didn't think that way. They were artists, not storytellers.
Exactly. Damn it, Jim.
Yeah, basically, if you're Marvel, it really helps if you're Jack Kirby and have written and drawn things for the last 20 years anyway.
Conversely, if you're Alan Moore, you have to know that page 17 and page 21 are going to be parallel with each other, and
Yes.
you want your panels laid out exactly the right way, with words positioned so that if you look at it with pages lifted up and put it to your eyes and look at it like this, it's a whole new story.
Yep.
But, that requires black magic, which he's proficient at. so-
Well, yes. The Dark Horse method
Alan Moore.
is what is basically, and
Leave
we describe it,
Extraordinary
page 1,
Gentlemen.
panel 1, scene, from an over-the-shoulder view, yada, 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 and then 1, you put the name, and then you write the script in all caps, because that's how the letterer is gonna put it out there. And then you basically, but it's almost like reading a play.
Enter Romeo.
It's very much like reading a play.
But I find that the Dark Horse, especially if you're working with an artist, especially if you're working with an artist who is, shall we say, inexperienced in doing comics, sometimes if you can lay it out for them, we want 5 panels on this page, 7 panels on this page, 6 panels on this page. Here are the camera angles I want to see the stuff at. It helps a new author or a new artist. It helps an author too, because you control the pacing. When you do it more the Marvel DC way, where you
The
give
art,
just a
that was what Fraden was complaining about. She didn't know how to pace out a 17-page story from an outline.
and then the author has to come back and pray that the artist left them enough negative space that word balloons will fit on here. And that's, does anybody know what I mean by when I say negative space? Okay. Yeah, basically it's all the stuff that's not the characters, that you can paste a word balloon on top of and nobody's gonna care.
You're ruining my art.
They look.
That's
I hear that plenty enough, yes.
That's the same style they called DC style before they called it Dark Horse.
Okay.
Wasn't Jim Starlin, whenever he started, like really bad at that, like having like 20 characters on the panel?
Yes.
Jim Starlin was allowed to write and draw his own material with almost no editorial interference, which means he made every mistake you could possibly make that an editor would catch. Fortunately, he was Jim Starlin, he could write that well, and he could draw that well, and he could get past it. But he made an enormous number of rookie mistakes because functionally he wasn't getting any editing help at the beginning of his career. Then he stopped making mistakes, and books he got even better.
With, like I said, in my writing, like I said, I've only had like about 6 books published. Again, like I said, the black and white implosion was ugly.
Ooh.
What was your title?
I did a book. I have it out at my table. I have 3. I have a graphic novel that collect up the three of the books called Troubleshooters Incorporated.
I know that book.
which came out in the early '90s, and then I have another couple that I've put out. One is Chronicles of the Sea Dragon #0, because I published just enough that I could hand it out to other publishers and say, here's my concept, would you be interested in picking this up as a series, because I don't want to publish again. And I've worked on a second edition of Troubleshooters, bringing it up more to modern times, because Troubleshooters, the original Troubleshooters Incorporated, really does read like a '90s comic. And lots of action, lots long fight scenes and talking in the middle.
Giant guns.
Well, I didn't go quite that. The problem is I'm a historian also, so I get very fussy about stuff actually sort of needs to look semi-realistic.
You get sick around Blyfield in a hurry.
Oh.
I've been working on my Liphelticus trapezius. It's this 8th ab. I laugh now. It wasn't funny at the time, because I remember it was Dallas Fantasy Fair, which doesn't exist anymore, but Image had just started up literally 4 months before the show, and Liefeld had a table there. And so I went over, he wasn't there, but some of his other artists were. And I said, how's Image doing? Oh man, we're looking great, everything's going right. I said, well, okay, it's kind of pro to pro. What are you guys getting for a page rate? $1,000. You're getting $1,000 a page for a 20-page comic?
Yep.
Dude, it's great. What are the writers getting? And they went, writers?
Yeah.
Yes.
It was poster books back then.
Yeah, they said, yeah, we just need, it's full page, splash pages, double pages, because we can sell the crap out of those things at conventions.
A lot of the way Image got started was that when they allowed Todd McFarlane and Rob Liefeld to start writing their own stories, Todd McFarlane and Rob Liefeld's sales didn't go down, so the two of them convinced themselves they were great writers. This was false, but they convinced themselves of it because the books were selling from the art. And then eventually it was a panel at the Chicago Comic Con that McFarlane showed up for. Do artists need writers? And his argument was no, we don't need them. They don't sell the books. The cover sells the books. He says, as long as I've got a cool shot of Spider-Man coming at you right out of the cover and everything else is in place, and I've got at least some line work on the background to make it look detailed, it's much more detailed than the kids think it is, and they love the image of Spider-Man leaping out at them, and that's how the book gets sold.
Have you seen the video of Stan Lee working with Rob and Todd designing a character?
I am not a Stan Lee fan and should not be started on that subject.
That's fair.
In my opinion,
Dave
Marvel
Ortiz
is the
and
house
Macy
of
Bono.
Kirby and Ditko. Bearing in mind I was a teenager when these started, I'm older than I look. The first comic book I bought was Showcase #8, which is the second Flash appearance. My collection goes back to Showcase #4. I have the entire Silver Age. Every single superhero book written in the 60s. So I got a perverse viewpoint, and one of the viewpoints is, there's nothing original here. The superheroes all fight with each other. Right, just like they did at Timely in 1940, when the Human Torch and the Submariner, couldn't tell the Submariner was a hero or a villain or what the hell he was. And then, what's all this overwrought writing of dialogue blooms? Oh, he's figured out that there's drama in romance comics. And if you look at 1956 romance comics, which were started by Simon and Kirby, say, oh, that's exactly the writing style Stan Lee was using in Fantastic Four. In other words, it's the house that Kirby built. Stan Lee was not on his own an outstanding creator. And it's also why the quality didn't drop when he let the artists paste their own stories. He wasn't that good at it.
But for like I said, for writing comics, one thing that I found, and I've had beat into me by a couple of editors, is take your average comic. Page 1, page 3 should always especially if you're writing an action adventure story, that last panel is a cliffhanger, a mini cliffhanger. Why? Make them open up to see page 2. They'll read page 2, page 3. Oh wait, there's more, and then they go to page 4. So you
That's a trick of the trade.
yeah.
No, I don't mind.
So you know, yeah, and also, depending on working with your artist, is when you're thinking about how the story's flowing, is you really need panels, and this is where your artist can help you too, is make your panels flow from one to the other. So like one of the tricks they showed, like that I had a friend of mine who was a comic artist show me, they had something going on in panel 1, and one of the guys had his arm pointed out to panel 2. And in panel 2, such and such was going on, and there was like movement to the lower right-hand corner, which drew your eye then back to panel 3, and so on. So if you're doing like the dark, like we call it, what I call the dark horse thing, you know, where you're actually laying out everything in a full script for your artist, think about trying to throw in those little cues again to kind of help the story. You know, and especially if you're using because some people like to do like those really odd long panels, and then they'll have like 3 on the side, or they'll have like almost a diagonal panel, and then a couple of them. You got to help the
Artists don't get bored any more than anybody else does.
Yeah, but it'll help the readers follow. You know, especially if you're using, like I said, the odd. If you're trying to do something stylized, and you know, because your artist loves you when you do that, because it keeps them from just drawing squares. And 2, you know, I always tried to reward, like when I did Chronicles of the Sea Dragon. I mean, there was a lot of technical detail because, again, I'm a history major. If I'm writing pirates are going to have armor that looks like you could actually wear it. There will be no 4-foot spikes on the shoulder, so that when you lift your sword up, you cut your ear off. Not going to happen.
Yourself.
Yeah, but because he had done some very technical stuff for me, I basically was, and there it was, page 24 to 26, fight scene in the city between the pirates and the guards. Have fun. Knock yourself out.
Some artists love that, and the other artists just hate it.
But he just went to town, and all I had to do was come in behind him and add in a couple of captions to explain what was going on, and boom, we were done. And that's also saved me having to write 3 pages, which when you're in a time crunch sometimes comes in really handy.
On the subject of continuity, I got taught this by an artist. I can't draw at all, but he said that there is a compositional deal in comics. So this is page 1, page 2, and page 3. And what you do is you divide it into thirds and make diagonal composition lines in the sense of art composition. Those of you who can draw know what the heck that means. And the reason for this is how people read. So you maintain your compositional diagonals. Essentially, you start here and then pick up at 1/3 of the way down the next page, and then 2/3 of the way down it goes to the corner. And the artist said that is basically how you design storytelling. And this is a long time ago in the 60s. I went out and bought an extra copy of the latest Spider-Man that Steve Ditko had drawn. And since, you know, it cost 12 cents, I cut it up. I split it open and laid the pages down, and you could see it. You could see the compositional diagonals through the entire story. If you just lay up one page, the next one 1/3 of the way down, the next one 1/3 of the way down for that, you could follow the whole 20-page story laid it out on the carpet. So that's something you have to think about to write with. They're going to read in this sequence. Try to make something for your artist to do that will allow him to compose in this sequence.
And
It's harder than you think, because you have to think like an artist. And if you can't draw, boy, can I not draw. All I can do is think of it as play directing, which I actually can do.
And what I also found, because again, I cannot draw. That's the reason I write, because I see the picture, it gets to about right here and stops.
Yep.
But I also took film direction when I was in college. And I found that there's the wonderful world of storyboarding.
Yep.
Storyboards are nothing more than stick figures. But when you're laying out a scene, I recommend, especially if you're not comfortable with, is it too much? Is it not enough? Is my page too busy? Sit down and actually kind of just do, kind of break, I said, I think I want 6 panels on this page. Well, then draw just make a quick 6-panel thing, draw in some stick figures, and look at it and go, do I have enough room for word balloons? Is there so much action described? So maybe all I can get in maybe is like a little caption in this. Or is there something I need to be saying? Well, then I need to cut back on I need to divide the action up over 2 panels so that I've got room to write the story. And then also remember, the last thing an artist wants to do is draw characters about this tall with 42 word balloons in the same panel. Unless you're Dave Sim.
Unless the word balloon is actually part of the art to convey the fact that there's so much talking that no sense can be made. John Byrne has done that before.
And
Dave Sim.
Dave Sim. Dave Sim was notorious for lots of word balloons and very little mini figures running around the back.
Dave Simmons is not entirely sane.
Well, I wasn't going to go quite there yet, but yes.
Well, I'm thinking about his relationships with Wonderful World of Women.
Yes.
He's not entirely sane.
But I mean, by storyboarding, it gives you like I said, you kind of flesh things out before you send it to your artist, who then sends you back an nasty round going, what the hell are you thinking? How am I supposed to draw this? If you've taken a little time, they appreciate the fact that you've actually worked some of this out. But also listen to them, because sometimes you'll lay out something and your artist may come back and say, I think it might work better if we flip these 2 scenes around. I think it would flow better. Maybe this should be on the next, I should bump this over to the next page. Now, of course, you're going to have to do some rewriting, but I have found most artists understand this better than I do. And when it comes to when it comes to the art, and honestly, if you think it looks better drawing it from over this guy's shoulder down the stairs instead of this guy's shoulder looking up the stairs, honestly, I don't care. I want it to look good. As long as it doesn't interfere with the flow of the story.
Yeah, as long as it reads well, in addition to looking pretty.
Now, one of the things I want to bring up is that the compositions that you guys brought up, are all of you looking to do a published, hold it in your hand paper copy? Or are some of you looking to do web comics? Because now you've got an entirely different dynamic, because you've got the infinite canvas. And everything that's been set up here, throw it out, because you can have that canvas shift to the left, shift to the right, upside down. Scott McCloud showed one at not a convention, but he did a college course that I audited. And it was just a single panel of a guy falling. You kept scrolling, and he's, there he is again, he's still falling, and it's the same background the whole time. And it was just this infinite fall that you could read the story as you scroll down one panel. It's totally different thought process now.
There's a structural. Will Eisner had always maintained, he's dead now, that comic books are not paced like movies. They're paced like live theater. This is true. I am convinced of it. I've directed plays. I essentially minored in theater. I was majoring in math. That's a separate story. In my graduate school, I burned out a year of dissertation in English with a specialty in old plays. In plays, they have this technical term in directing called a tableau. If you go see a play, you'll see immediately that one of the biggest difficulties is figuring out who the hell is talking. If everyone's just sitting there, where to focus? So a tableau is a stage picture where 1 or 2 people are moving and they're doing all the talking. So you can identify them immediately. Well, that's the equivalent in a comic book of a panel. Plays are constructed this way, tableau by tableau by tableau, in the same way that comic books are constructed panel by panel by panel. And it turns out that there are actually numbers to this. Is there anyone here who doesn't read newspapers, comic strips? Good. Everybody will know what the hell I'm talking about. If you read newspapers, comic strips, and skipping the gag-a-days, you'll find that they have 3 panels or 4, almost always. If you read Pearls Before Swine, it's 4 panels, 4 panels, 4 panels, month after month. There's a reason for this that has to do with logic. Logic is a fundamental concept called a Sorites. It is your major premise, your minor premise, and your conclusion. In the world of writing fiction, it's premise, counter, resolution. Okay? Beginning, middle, and end, essentially. Except that if you're working in comics, you can have, and usually do have, premise, counter, false resolution, true resolution. In the world of vaudeville, they call this the rim shot. Stephen Pass's Pearl Before Swine is always written like that. There's a premise, a counter, a bad pun, and then a rat on the table telling Stephen Passes to go get a life. Just like a vaudeville rim shot. And what you can do if you're building a comic is you can take, let's take Watchmen because it's real simple. It's 9-panel grid every page. You have 3 across, premise, counter, resolution. The next tier is 3 across, premise, counter, resolution. Next tier, but the first tier is in itself a premise that is countered by the second tier, that is resolved by the third tier. And that page is the premise. And the next page is the counter to that. And the next page is the resolution of that. And the entirety of Watchmen is structured like that. Cool. In 3-panel, I call it nesting. You have the 3-panel strip. Take 3 of those, you have a page. Take 3 pages, you've got 3 pages. Something very interesting about comic books in that regard. If you have a splash page, and say 9 pages of panels, of pages nesting that build to the climax or build to your turning point, and then 9 more pages that come off it, which is 3 pages for the premise, 3 for the counter, and 3 for the resolution, and then 1 more for the come hither for the next book. What you got is 1 plus 9 plus 9 plus 1, which is 20. 20 is the average number of pages in an American superhero comic. If you are writing and you are having trouble with structure, you can go back and put this very heavy-handed mathematical structuring purpose, and when it blows up, that's where you have a structure problem. I'm not suggesting that everybody write rigidly in 3 and 4 panel structures. What I'm saying is, if your structure isn't working, try to force it to do that and see where it blows up, because that's where your structural problem is. And you can do these 3s and 4s and nest them. If you look in 60s comics, you'll find that there are an awful lot of pages with 7 panels. And the reason is that you can nest them in all kinds of groups. 1, 3, 3, 3, 1, 3, 3, 3, 1, 2, 2, 3. There's all kinds of ways of doing this to build a panel without just relying on a 9-panel grid. So it's useful if you're a comic book writer to be aware that there is a mechanical, mathematical process in constructing a comic book that is similar to the way plays are constructed. Play tableaus are nested in exactly the same way. And you can go looking at newspaper strips and see how this gets done, how this gets laid out. What does and doesn't, what strip isn't working for you, Nancy, and what strip is working for you, Doonesbury. And you'll find that the structures are more complicated, but still follow the rules in the better strips. In the weaker strips, you get very rigid structures, and they have nothing to say.
And a good example, if you want to check it out, to see like how, especially when you're talking about the old-fashioned 9 panels per page. If you go to, there's a couple of places. One is the Digital Comic Museum. Another one is Comic Book Plus.
Yeah.
But they have a lot of the stuff that's in public domain that they have digitized. Look up Jumbo Comics, because they have in there, one is it's again laid out at a 9, because I think these were originally lifted from the newspapers and then just published as comics. But one is called The Hawk, which was written by Will Eisner.
Okay.
Written and drawn by Will Eisner. The other one, I don't remember who did it, but basically they did the Count of Monte Cristo
Jack Kirby.
as a comic book in the 9 panel. But you can see how, again, those are great just examples of if I'm getting started and I'm not sure how. I mean, those are two masters who were taking, one's a pirate comic, one is, well, not Count of Monte Cristo, it's the Count of Monte Cristo.
Kirby did that, he did it as a newspaper strip, so it was put together in books, it was already organized in 3 and 4 panel strips.
Right.
It was Jack Kirby that did that.
Okay, but Jumbo Comics you can start with number 1. They're in black and white. They don't go color until like about number 10 because color was expensive. Because they were just lifting the black and white newspaper strips and just publishing them. So, but it's fascinating to obviously you can't write in some of the styles that they wrote in back then. I mean, a 2020 audience isn't going to be that interested in that style. But just looking at see how especially like some of the older comics are from the 40s and stuff. When comics were really in their infancy, and people were playing with things, trying to figure out how to make it work, and see how a strip evolves over, like even if just read 10 issues of that comic, and see how because back then a story only got usually like 5 pages or 6 pages.
The lead feature would get 13, and they'd get 6 or 7.
Yeah.
That's what I was
To
going to
fill out the 64-page book.
Is how can we get, right now we have a generation of people who are reading comics where the writer of the comic is being given a 100-issue deal to work out whatever he's got to work out.
You mean like Jason Aaron's last 7 years absolutely despising Thor and refusing to write a Thor story?
Oh, I was thinking more of Tom King's Batman run where Batman.
You got me there.
Yeah. But how can you, what kind of tricks could you give people to say, this is how I'm going to compress my storytelling rather than decompress it the way that it's being blown up? Because nobody writes comic books anymore. They write chapters of graphic novels.
Yes.
Well, that is true, and
basically that's the answer.
Well, basically,
Outline the graphic novel.
yeah. Well, actually, when I came up with the idea behind Chronicles of the Sea Dragon, which is again it's a pirate comic, well, privateer, but pirate, that's what it's called. It was always designed to be 36 issues long. Each 6 issues was going to be an arc. Why? 6 issues is perfect to put in a graphic novel. But each individual story was going to be written to stand alone. But there would be threads that would go through the next 6 issues, but there would be then threads that would follow all the way from issue 1 through issue 36. But I actually wrote at least a mini synopsis for myself of all 36 issues and made sure that my threads tied up. Because there's nothing worse than, oh, please don't do the Chris Claremont thing where Eric the Red and Polaris and Havoc attack the X-Men in issue 98, and they fly off, and it's 172 issues later before Eric the Red and what happened? You went to all this trouble to introduce this thing, and then you forgot about it for like 100 issues. Chris, don't tie up your loose ends.
In Chris's defense, he was writing an enormous number of comic books at the time because the X-Men was a franchise. Yeah, because the X-Men was a franchise and he wouldn't give up any control. So he was writing 6 and 7 books a month. And he did invent something that's very useful in storytelling in comics. The X-Men, under Chris Claremont and Dave Cockrum, after Giant Size X-Men #1, had a system for not having the characters go stale, which happens in comics. Basically, in the X-Men, you write a story centered around, Polaris and Cyclops. And then Polaris and Cyclops suddenly have reasons to leave, and you bring in Gambit and Rogue and run a story about them. And that way, your characters never get stale because you don't have the same cast in every storyline. You shuffle them in and out. This is a brilliant discovery in terms of putting together a long-term franchise comic. The realization that you don't have to have the whole cast in every issue or even every storyline. But it is true that Eric the Viking was a long time coming back.
One of the things that Chris Claremont, why that team got so diverse and thus so popular, was Chris was challenging people
Yes.
It says, I can write any dialect. And that's what they said, okay, how about Canadian? And that's how we got Wolverine.
Although I will, I have to put on my hat here. If you are going to do dialect, dialect is like garlic. A little bit is wonderful, but that's all you
A
need.
little bit more, no.
Do not, if you're, not every Scotsman sounds, I know there's at least 7 different dialects in Scotland. Every Scotsman does not sound like he's from Glasgow. And but nobody wants to read 42 pages of Glaswegian dialect. Just throw in occasional word here and there, and they'll get the idea that, oh, that guy's from Scotland. Oh, that guy's from India or whatever.
Hence the catchphrases for every character. Every character in the X-Men has this phrase that he keeps repeating over and over that is meant to represent the essence of the character. It's basically shorthand to remind you who the heck this guy is since you haven't seen him for a year and a half. And it's really helpful to identify characters like that. If you do it, people who are reading the story can actually follow reading the story rather than looking at pictures to find out who the hell you're talking about. Because everybody's dialogue sounds the same. My guess is that a lot of what went into Wolverine is that John Byrne is Canadian. So John Byrne could tell him what Canadian for this sounds like, because he was Canadian.
Unlike how, Marvel apparently forgot that Wolverine's Canadian, by the way.
Marvel has forgotten a lot of things.
Marvel
Some of
now
them
is a
even
lifestyle
deliberately.
brand. They actually ran a cooking channel. And did you see the video that they did?
I was at the panel where that was introduced.
They did a video last week where there's like, we're cooking Cajun gumbo. We got enough Cajun food here to even make Wolverine happy.
No, it's Gambit, not Wolverine.
Exactly.
But Wolverine's more recognizable.
Yes,
And apparently they
that
didn't
is
want to
the
make
curse
Canadian food.
of having a star character,
Yeah.
is that it gets stale. Wolverine gets stale regularly, and then some other writer has to find another cast of characters surrounding Wolverine so he can do something new and different, because everybody's writing a Wolverine story and they're supposed to all connect together in this one giant Marvel universe. But you got 17 writers with 17 different plot lines and they all gotta have Wolverine in them.
And editorial doesn't give a crap anymore.
Yeah.
It used to be you could do that. I'm sorry.
No, you're
good. But when you had things like DC would do Crisis on Infinite Earths, or Marvel would have, their Secret Wars, by golly, that one event had tendrils and everything, and they all made sense.
Yes.
And now it's like you have Doomsday Clock, which should have been a fantastic tie-in between. It should have been an event.
I realized that Jeff Johns was going to write it, and the only issue I read was number 10, which was awful.
He did write it, and apparently Jeff's gone past his ways. But there are events in that series that should be having